What's up, y'all? It's Cousin Chet back with Dillion on Dilligan's Island. Um, how's everybody doing? Good to see you. Glad to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you 10,000%. Um, and today we are going to talk about. So I heard the president of the Philippines make a speech, and in that speech, um, he's discussing his war on drugs and what many people feel is a very violent and not really a program that supports or encourages or even acknowledges human rights. President Duterte is open about saying if you're a drug user, you're a drug dealer, I'm going to kill you. He pretty much comes out right out and says it. But in the speech, he makes the comment and he says, what you care about is human rights. What I care about is human lives. And I thought that was a very compelling kind of thought experiment to go on because, as a citizen, I firmly feel that human rights trumps all. But I recognize that my fellow citizens of the world do not necessarily agree because a lot of you would gladly trade what you would call security for human rights. And I've seen it happen, especially since 9/11, that we were more than willing to give up our human rights for a little bit of security. And that has progressively continued. And then COVID came, and there was another example of how willingly people were to give up their rights. Um, and I thought during COVID how willing people were to not only give up their own rights, but to bully those who wanted to stand up for their rights. And so that leads me to the comment question of the week. In the comments, and I have to remember to pin. I need to pin this in the comments. The question is, what's more important, human rights or human lives? And where do our political leaders hold the responsibility to define that line? And that's my question to you, Dilligan.
Well, I didn't think about it as deeply as you did. This was your idea for a topic.
Fair enough.
But
I just threw him under the bus, and he's like, "Here's the bus for you."
but the funny thing was when I did it, when I finally got around to reading your text message, it I sped read it
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of brushed over it because I was in the middle of going from one place to another. But it was even just barely brushing over it, that was a really profound, like you said, thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
It was I'm not concerned with human rights. I'm concerned with human lives. It's I could instantly see how somebody's priorities would be switched like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see why it's such a brilliant political thing to say is because it's
Mm-hmm.
what are you worried about? Are you worried about your rights? Are you
Mm-hmm.
worried about all of the special privileges you get
Mm-hmm.
as a citizen? Is that what you're interested in, or are you interested in your actual life being preserved? Your stuff being safe?
Well, I think for me, that question comes to whose responsibility is it to preserve my life? And who has the right to dictate what I'm allowed to do based on the risk that I'm willing to take? For me, I lean
That's,
towards human
yeah.
rights. I understand that many of you, and please make a comment if this is you. I think there are many people that would think that my opinion, my stance is absolutely ludicrous. That obviously lives come first, and again, I another example, and this is a small one, but at one point you didn't have to have a car seat in your car. You didn't have to wear a seatbelt, right? You were put in a vehicle. You were given a license. You knew the risk that there's an accident. You could be maimed. You could be killed. Um, and then at some point they decided that the government felt strongly that we and insurance companies, because those actuarials are like, we are paying out way too much in these injuries, because and if these people were seatbelts, then we would pay less. um and it's such a small thing, but it was when they said you have to wear a seatbelt. You're not mature enough to make the decisions for yourself. It is now a law.
Yeah.
And I think and that's why this that phrase really caught my attention, because I understand that there are a lot of people that have no issue with it. They have no issue with the government parent. And they would say that that is their role, right? Their role is to protect people, right? And so what is protect? It's to protect and preserve their life. But to me, I feel like that's just a really easy way for a dictator to say, you don't have any rights. You're a bunch of dumb imbeciles. You don't know what's good for you. So, it's up to me and my ruling class of people who are in the know. We do know, but we do know what's best for you. Or it is up to the actuarials. So, how did I come about this comment by the president of the Philippines? So I'm a pretty good fan of Frontline on PBS. I know PBS, like, over the last 20 years, it was really, they've always been kind of liberal, but they really kind of, I feel like they're starting to, like, you got, every news outlet is part of a propaganda machine for somebody. There's influence that they want to exert. But so I'm watching this Frontline episode about the Philippines, and I become aware of a woman named Maria Angelita Delphin Icardo Ressa. Maria Ressa um, is a Filipino American journalist. So she was born in the Philippines. At one point in her life, she moves to the United States, lives in New Jersey, and then ends up going back to the Philippines. And at one point, is the CNN, um, is like the CEO of CNN Manila. She's interviewed President Duterte. I apologize for mispronouncing your name, Mr. President. Um, a couple times. But at some point, her news organization, which is called Rappler, does some stories, or says some things about the war on drugs in the Philippines, and really hard questions Duterte. Will you get his name? I'm just gonna Duterte is how I'm gonna do it. If anybody knows the correct pronunciation, please spell it phonetically. I've got it. I see it. Duterte. I got it. Duterte, Rodrigo Duterte. And I'm not, look. See, here's one thing I want to be very clear about. I'm not picking sides in this fight, in the argument in the Philippines. Whether I agree or disagree with either one of these people, because I recognize that as a leader, as the president of the country, there's just a whole, like, it is what it is, and this man is in that position, and I mean, I'm down to question people, but on this particular topic, I really want to stay focused on, um, and I mean, I am going to disagree with him because he ends up arrested. He ends up like politically trying to nullify this woman, according to the Frontline article, and I'd say according to her. So I guess there's some kind of law in the Philippines about the press. So obviously, the Philippines don't have the same freedom of press that we understand in the United States. But I think this is a bigger thing than that because I think sometimes we need to question our own freedom of press, and I think this is a good place to start. So because this woman questions him and she is the head of a major media organization, she does have some resources, and she is very strong. I'm really impressed with this woman. She's Maria. I don't know you. You know the little kid in high school that's backpack was dang near bigger than their back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that nerdy little kid that like his backpack was just full of all his books type shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like and you know like male or female is like the last one to really like get a growth spurt or whatever. You know what I mean? That's what Maria looks like to me. Like they showed a picture of this woman walking down the hall, and even now as an adult, this woman she's born in 45. Oh my gosh! So she's how old? Somebody do some math for me.
She was born.
She's like 70 some years old, right? Oh, she's 50. Huh? Do I know how to do math? Who's born in 45? Because that was.
I think that's Duterte.
Oh, Duterte's born in 45. Okay, my bad. So this one, she's almost 60, right? And I don't know, for this Frontline article is like 2 years old. She went to Princeton. So she's a little smart. So, but that's like, so exactly, right? Here she is, this little Filipino girl coming to New Jersey. I'm guessing if there is any kind like, unless she's going to like a Filipino high school, this woman went to probably a public school. This woman got bullied. She was probably out of places, all get out. And she's small and she's tiny. And what she chose to do was use her brain. And this woman is up against bullies. Like, this woman is fighting giants. It's amazing, really. I wish they showed me how tall she was, because she's literally like, I bet you she ain't even 5 foot tall. So, comes to New Jersey, obviously gets educated in America, attends Princeton University. I mean, that's kind of prestigious. I don't know. These days, she may have been gotten in just because she was a quote unquote minority. Anyhow, she goes back to the Philippines. I apologize. I feel like I'm all over the place and I'm trying to get it a little more organized in my head. President doesn't like what she says. President takes her to court based on some law that they have about her, and apparently the Philippines, like, this is what some of these governments do, is they take over what is supposed to be a democratic thing. What's up?
Well, the first thing that stands out to me about Maria Ressa is she comes from an old school sort of journalism that you don't get anymore.
Yeah.
Like boots on the ground. Like, I was there, I saw it, I paid witness to this.
Mm-hmm.
And the first person I think of when I think of those old school, that older kind of generation of journalists is Christopher Hitchens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever read anything of Christopher Hitchens, but you've almost certainly read something of C.S. Lewis, haven't you?
Huh?
Well, it's like it's witty in the way that C.S. Lewis is witty, where it's like he's just got like this stunning command over his own language.
Yeah.
Anyways, but point is there's a similar like old school journalism that like that seems like kind of her essence.
Right? Go back to her, bro.
And what it speaks to is like a profound sense of integrity.
Yes. And watching the interviews and seeing her speak, I think that is one thing that she leans on. She's got a very strong constitution, especially in regards to press freedom and human rights. Um, it's not surprising that somebody educated in the very liberal academic world of the United States would really push up against, especially at her age, like that generation. We were still told that like to honor people like Martin Luther King and Gandhi. We were the martyrs of the world, the standing up to the empire, so to speak. And I think that's definitely not what they're teaching these kids in schools now. Like they don't want rebellious people at all. They want everybody to toe the line. You know what I mean? This is how you're supposed to behave. They want to like institute forced behavior, which in a sense is what I mean in a very violent way what Duterte is doing with his war on drugs in the Philippines. I mean it's almost like the way they make it sound, and I want to be careful about that because I have to recognize that everybody's trying to influence us, and they want to influence what we think and how we perceive. And then they also want to influence our behavior, and so everybody's trying to influence you, right? Like everybody that you're watching on YouTube, including me, right? Like including us, like what am I trying to influence you to do? I'm trying to influence you to think out loud, critically, to be very much like what Maria is doing, is saying that, we have a freedom to think, we have a freedom to speak, and we have a freedom to come together and share our thoughts and ideas, whether or not other people like them or not. You know what I mean? Like this whole, like, I'm offended, so it has to go. I'm like, well, I'm offended because you're offended. Like, bro, like, come on, like, like, who gets to draw the line on who's offended and whose rights are taken away? No, it should be we all share the same rights. And if you don't want to listen, then you don't have to. In the algorithms that we're creating, you really don't. I mean, it's easy to block somebody or just stop watching them. I think it's dangerous too to put yourself in a bubble. So back to Maria Ressa. I'm just really first and foremost, I want to get back to that kind of human rights or human lives. So I make you the president of your own country. And I've got a spectrum, right? So human lives over here and human rights over here. Or, you know what? Since we're doing the left right thing, human rights, because that's kind of a leftist issue, and human lives, because that seems to be the conservative issue, right? The conservatives they tend to be the ones. The liberals are kind of doing it more and more nowadays, but nonetheless. Here's my spectrum. Where you go? You 50-50? You 60-30? 60-40.
Like, you're asking me.
Yeah, you're the president.
Percentage?
You're the president. Where's your spectrum on, like, you're in charge of 10 million people.
See, here's where it gets a little more complicated for me than just
That's fair.
Conservative is, in terms of that spectrum, I think it changes whether you're in the Philippines or whether you're in the United States.
I'm listening.
Because in the United States, because of our Constitution, to use it as a legal defense that I have certain rights as an American citizen, and those are like foundational, those are principal.
Well, according to the writers, they are inalienable for all humans, and that's one reason why America supposedly spreads democracy.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, the point is that is a resource legally.
Yeah.
It's been a profound resource.
Sure. But hold on, but you're kind of making this more complicated than what it has to be, because I asked you, you're in charge, fictitious country, right? Yeah. You're in charge of a fictitious country that has 5 million citizens, right?
But I'm saying in the Philippines, the Constitution you live under it's not necessarily encoded into your society,
Sure.
into your legal system that yes, these are your rights.
Sure.
The most libertarian, the most fundamental libertarian principles of living on the Western frontier.
Yeah.
Like that was like that does make a difference.
Okay.
And the thing is like where I think it gets complicated is what your human rights, I think, in the most libertarian fashion. I guess I'm speaking from the middle of the spectrum, but it's like from a libertarian perspective, like your rights are, I'm not bothering you, dude. You don't bother me if I don't bother you, and if we decide something's bothering both of us, we get involved with each other, and then we get to work. Then it's business.
So if I frame it in the context of the spectrum of rights versus lives.
Yeah.
Are you 50-50? Are you right in the middle there? Or
I think the rights are more important for that reason. Like I fall more on the rights end of the spectrum, but it's like where I see it gets messy is like nobody in the street is communicating to each other on a daily basis what the code is.
So here's a really strong and powerful one, because I think this is one where a lot of people would in the United States specifically would find a very polarizing issue. And so now I'm going to bring in the Second Amendment. According to the founders and framers of the Constitution, these are inalienable rights. These aren't rights that are given to you by another man. These aren't rights that are given to you by a government. These are rights that are given to you by the universe itself. By the very fact that you are alive, they claim that by the very fact that you are alive, you have these rights. So, with that being said, one of the rights is the Second Amendment because it protects the First Amendment and our right to defend ourselves. There are a lot of people in this country that would give up that right, and their argument is because it's taking lives. And so I think that's a really good example, and I guess we'll find out in the comments. By the way, I don't get a lot of comments. Somebody leave me a comment. Like just one. Somebody love me enough to have watched this for 22 minutes and 50 seconds. And make a comment. Don't make me comment on my own podcast. Thank you. So anyway, you understand what I'm saying? I think the Second Amendment is in the United States is a really good example of that spectrum, right? The rights versus lives. And where do you come down on that? Because there is part of me that says, okay, in one respect, I understand the Second Amendment not to be about hunting, sports, or anything like that. To me, the Second Amendment is about our ability to defend ourselves. Whether that's to defend myself against a bear, a burglar, or a tyrant. Like all the way up to tyrant. Now, because of the proliferation of guns and the access to guns in this country, many people feel like the access is way too easy and that people are dying and that we need to have some type of that we need to have some type of regulation. I am kind of a purist. I feel like the citizens should be able to have any kind of weaponry and armory that a government can have. Because, again, you're supposed to be able to protect yourself. Now, obviously, nobody can afford that. Hell, fucking the rest of the world's governments together could barely afford to compete against ours. But, nonetheless, the right remains, in my opinion.
What do you think of when you hear the word anarchy?
When I think of anarchy, I think of lawlessness, complete lawlessness. I think of anarchy, there are no laws, there are no rules. So when I think of anarchy, I think of movies like The Purge. That's what I think of anarchy. When I think of anarchy, I think of Genghis Khan coming into
You think of like the
Eastern
riot,
Europe and
like the riot that,
sorry.
like the riot part of it. Not like the fallout the day after, but it's like that's what pops into mind. It's
Well,
like
because I
people
don't think
coming
that I don't think that not just the riot though. No, I think it's that's why I mentioned Genghis Khan, right? I think it's the ability of okay, there are no rules, there are no laws. There are some people that are going to be nice to people, and there are going to be other people. When I think of anarchy, I think of what happens in our prisons. You know what I mean? There are two sets of rules. You know what I mean? Like you're not safe there. That's one thing I think of as anarchy. Is I think of there's zero security, right? Because what stops me from shooting you in your head and just taking all your shit? There are no rules, there are no laws. That's what I think of anarchy. No rules, no laws.
So this is what's weird though is at the end of the day, I've always understood what people mean when they say classical liberalism. Like Christopher Hitchens, like to a certain degree, like C.S. Lewis included. Like there's a certain classic liberal intellectual that has been like the most influential, one of the most influential like scripts in my head is like, oh, this is what a classic liberal thinks. And these are the kinds of things you come out of college thinking with an English degree, I guess. But
Right.
like the one thing that they all seem like they have in common is they're always expressing this sentiment of humans basically want to be good. It is a fundamental drive of humans to want to be a good human.
I think that's a very fantastic way of looking at the world because I disagree completely. Go ahead.
What I'm more terrified of, I think, though, is living in a world where no one believes that that's even that could be true.
I mean, let's look at it. Who's good? Who's a good guy right now?
I mean, who's the bad guy?
I'm saying everybody is. Tell me who's the good guy.
I mean, in this,
I'm saying
moment,
everybody's selfish. Everybody's out for themselves. One person will paint themselves to be the good guy, but really they're the bad guy. I mean, look at Biden, Trump. Who's the good guy? Democrat, Republican Party. Point to a good guy. Okay, Rand Paul. I'll point to a good guy. There's one out of 300, 400 of them within the whole government that I can point to and say, there's a good guy. There's a good person. Like a legit, and here's Maria Ressa. They're very few and far between. The Rodrigo Duertes of the world are much more common, in my opinion. The more selfish,
they're more common, but they're not the only ones.
No, they're not. But what I'm saying is that to me, that's the world. Like most everybody is selfish. Most everybody has no problem shitting on another person. Nobody has a problem. Nobody has a problem with the sales representative that has a markup of 200%, and then tries to tell you that you're saving you money because they knocked off 20% of a 200% markup. And then they want to finagle you into all these secret lender loans, and nobody cares how you got your money. Nobody cares who you stepped on. Nobody cares that Cardi B robbed men and drugged them and shit. This bitch is fucking on Walmart commercials now. Bill Cosby's in jail. So who's the good guy? You know what I mean? Who decides who the good guy is first and foremost? What makes a person good? In Chet's opinion, it's not selfish. It's being non-selfish. A good person doesn't step on everybody else for their own success. And in this world that I see a bunch of people more than happy to step on whoever the fuck they want. And as soon as they get their money right, everybody wants to fucking suck all their cocks. Yeah, demonetized, sorry. But that's how I literally see the world like that. Nobody gives two shits how anybody made their money. Kennedy was one of the best presidents. He's a fucking gangster. He was put in there by fucking gangsters. Who are the good guys? Kennedys? The gangsters? Like, come on, man. I think for a long time, everybody had this Disney fucking Snow White version of the world. And the reality is it was never like that. It's always been gangster. It's always been gangster. The kings and queens of Europe have all who were which one of them were good?
See, that's what I think of when I think of anarchy.
No, but see the problem, they do have anarchy. They don't have rules.
Yeah.
No, but we do. And in any case, it's not good. How has their anarchy been good for the people of the world? How is their anarchy and all their fighting against all them fucking inbred cousins of the royal families of the fucking of Europe? How is their anarchy benefited the world at large? I saw them colonize. I saw mass murder. I saw mass slavery. I saw the taking over of wealth from nations. And catch that, wealth of nations. That's what they stole. That's what they stole from the whole fucking world. But you know what?
Well,
here's their thing though. Yeah. For them, it's not about lives. For them, it's not about human rights. For them, it's about power, money, and influence.
Which leads me again to the human rights side of things.
Yeah.
Because it's either that sort of anarchy, the anarchy that spans history. In my mind, it's like that you have the anarchy that is history. It is the human experience.
If I have one law, is that anarchy anymore? If I have one law, is it still constituted as anarchy? Again, I want to go to let's just fictitious island, imaginary island called Dilligan's Island.
Yeah.
Right? It's got 5 million people on it. If I have one, and we start off with anarchy, right? That's how humans start, right? We start off just a bunch of different tribes, a bunch of different whoever. Goddamn monkeys coming out of the trees or whatever.
If we're starting from scratch, there's one rule to start with. You get what you can take. Because
that's what anarchy is.
There's no rules.
The anarchy is the strongest, the one that's willing to prevent violence. That's the motherfucker that's gonna rule.
But there's something at rock bottom that you and I share in common with the classical liberals, which is there is a way of finding meaning in your life, which is being a good human.
Yeah, but not a lot of people get to the point where they recognize that what they do will affect the world for hundreds of years, even if in the most minute ways. Most people are much too selfish for that realization.
But doesn't that idea itself suggest that human rights are something you have to believe in?
I do. I do believe in their rights. Because look, if I accept the world as I've just described it, okay, fine. That's the world God created. I accept this. Remember when it said, and it was good? It's not about looking at the world the way I wish it would be, it's the way the world is. Right? So if I take the world as it is and I understand that, then I will say yes, there are we have to have those rights so that people like Maria Ressa, people like Rand Paul, people like me who have the ability to influence other people, who have taken the time to consider these things when everybody else is just stuck in survival mode. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people that they don't even have time to worry about this shit. They're just strictly trying to survive. And that's what the big selfish bullies, the super rich, they know this. That's why they're going to feed you with just like distractions, right? You want to know why Trump's in the news so much? Because he's a fucking distraction from what they're really doing.
Well, there's a difference.
And I can't even tell you what they're really doing because there's too much damn distraction. Yeah. I mean, there's just distractions upon distractions.
But it's like, that's what I respect about this
Which part?
This old school, like foundation of journalism, like this, like the grandchildren of the generation that broke Watergate,
Right.
like that kind of
journalism.
yeah. It's very.
That's a, you know what? To me, that's nothing but the same shit we got going on now. They just were able to hide it better. The fact that they even broke that story, they didn't want Nixon. Remember, this is.
Well, without going too
sorry,
deep down
but yeah, sorry, but to due respect to journalists of later years, yes, there were. I think in the United States there used to be good people. There really were people of integrity. There really were people that felt like we need to create a world where we can be safe from the fucking bullies and from the people from the dictators and tyrants. That's what we were founded on. That's what this country, that's what the great experiment is. The great experiment is, can we survive without resorting back to dictators? You know, the Democrats for a couple years ago had this quote they would do by Benjamin Franklin, and they love to keep throwing it out there. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer loved it. And it was Ben Franklin's, he's like, apparently he's coming out of the Constitutional Congress, excuse me, and he's asked, you know, what do we have, or what, or are we you know, or do we have a king or whatever? And he says, you know, you have a republic, or you have a democracy if you can keep it. You know what I mean? The idea that throughout history, even when we think about Rome, for a long time Rome was ran by a dictator.
Well, it's like I listen to
most countries in the hold on a second. Most countries in the world have been run by like one person, one party, and unfortunately, like the sad part about that is like they can railroad people, and people get railroaded all the time. You know, locally, at a state level, at a national level, and I think that there was a period of time where there was this sense of Americana where there was the idea that, and you know, it was the 50s and the 60s. It was like after World War II. It was, you know, as we're trying to understand racism and eugenics and the religious turmoil of the world. And I think a lot of us recognize that a lot of Americans were like, you know what, it is kind of up to us to try to make the world a better place and a safer place. And you know, we are that city on the hill. And then, but the sad thing is like, we really weren't. It was a good idea. Thanks for letting me finish.
See, I sound more optimistic now in my head when I think about anarchy, because I look at Maria Resner, I look at Christopher Hitchens, I look at C.S. Lewis.
Maria Ressa.
Maria Ressa. Well, anyways, I look at these people as examples of, well, dude, it's always a game of anarchy. And it's like, if you believe in fundamental human rights, if you believe in that libertarian perspective of, you know what, the town has the right to say what goes on inside the town. Like, when you believe that on a fundamental level, like, there is this tradition that you're a part of that is classically liberal, which respects human sovereignty, and how that human sovereignty, if you're living a life worth living, it expands beyond you. And the implications of recognizing the sovereignty of the individual, that has major implications for how you should conduct yourself if you really believe in that. And that's our gang.
I agree, but I think that whenever you have like some type of organization that sits up on high and says this is what is right, see, that's as I'm listening to you, I'm like, it's all kind of a form of anarchy anyway, right? Like the reality is like the laws apply depending on which country you're in, which depends on what state you're in, depending on how much money you have, how much influence you have, depending on which side of the law you're on, which side of the blue line are you on, type of shit.
We have to really think about what are your rights versus what are fake rules.
Well, I mean,
It's kind of one of those who watches the watchers things. Who decides what the rights are?
that well, but I think that's one thing that we look at the Constitution and we have an agreement on. What are the rights, right? The basic and fundamental right is the First Amendment, right? And when the First Amendment, pull the First Amendment up. Let me read this thing because I love it. There's a little acronym too that you can use. But the First Amendment, I want to read the actual First Amendment. I don't want somebody translating it for me. I don't want fucking somebody telling me what it means. I want to read the actual words myself. See, that's part of the problem is they want to also tell you what shit means. Oh, you don't know how to read. It's like when the Catholic Church was like, oh, we're just gonna do it all in Latin, so these dumb motherfuckers don't know what it actually says. Original transcript. All right. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. So, number one, the establishment, make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Most people would interpret that meaning that the government in and of itself cannot say our state religion is XYZ, right? They can't say one religion is right over another, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So they can't stop you from practicing religion. This, to me, that's a fun, like in any form. I've had issues with that, like, and some people have issues because what is a religion? To me, though, that when it talks about religion, I think of not just religion, but your worldview. This is your freedom to think, right? To me, the freedom to exercise your religion is the freedom to exercise your philosophy of the world, your worldview, right? Now, some people would disagree with that. They would be much more purist on religion and religion by itself. But to me, this First Amendment is really about the freedom to think, to have my own thoughts, and to say those thoughts, right? Because now, not only can they not stop me, not can they promote one religion over the other, they can't stop me from practicing my religion, nor can they talk me from sharing my thoughts. Whether that's me talking to you or whether that's putting it out as press. Because recognize this, my people, we are all the press all the time. You got a camera in your phone, you've got social media. That means you are the press. You are able to record and report on this world as you deem fit. You are the press. Ben Franklin, nothing made Ben Franklin any more press than me and you, right? You know what? He had a press. That's what made him the press, was that he had a printing press. And then to find like-minded people and to assemble. So the freedom to peaceably assemble, right? Again, this is all about my freedom of thought and my freedom to share my thoughts and my freedom to find other like-minded people. And then notice the last line is, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So, if I disagree with Joe Biden and his stance on the LGBTQ's insistence that drag shows are completely appropriate for toddlers in elementary school, I'm allowed to say that. If I disagree with Donald Trump using orange suntan, fake suntan lotion, and promoting it as if he is really real, I'm allowed to say that, right? That's the beauty of the freedom of thought, the freedom of expression, and the freedom of press, and the freedom to gather. See, that's why I have issues when, they want to say, oh, the Proud Boys did this. Right now, yes, you're going to say, oh, you're supporting the conservatives. You're alt-right. No, I'm not. I am fucking super pro-Constitution. And whether it's Antifa or the Proud Boys, it doesn't matter to me. If they're peacefully assembling to share their thoughts and ideas, then that's what they're allowed to do. And as far as I'm concerned, if they want to run themselves as a pseudo militia for defensive purposes, then they're allowed to do that. That's what the Constitution means to me. I know that makes some people feel unsafe, and so they want to give up their rights.
It sounds like anarchy.
Which part?
The right to forming militias.
How do you write pseudo?
PSUEDO. PSUEDO. I can't remember what I just said. Pseudo what?
I didn't get you.
I must have just used the word because he's. So I want to bring this back to, when we form societies, we kind of come to agreements, and not everybody agrees with those agreements as the generations change, right? You're born into the world. I'm born into the world as a United States citizen, which means I'm born in debt, which means at 18, I have to sign my life over to the government if they want to go to war and use my body as fucking cannon fodder. It means certain things. It means certain things in the way that I have to approach the world. Now, I'm thankful to be born in this United States. Sometimes I take it very much for granted because I realize that people born in other countries have a lot less rights. And that's sad to me. One of the beauties of this world is the way that the universe emanates itself through us. A lot of people don't like it because it's kind of neutral. It's really not a thing that's humans based on what humans feel is good or bad. That's the other thing, as we described earlier, who gets to decide what's good or bad. An example I use all the time when I'm talking about God and I'm talking about how he cares for the world is, who does God care about more, the antelope or the lion? Is the lion evil? Now, a lot of people and a lot of religious scholars would like to, well, humans are different. Are we? Are we really? I don't think so. But at the end of the day, because there is so much selfishness in the world, people like Maria Ressa, the good people with that type of integrity that do come through, they need to be protected so that they can let the universe speak through them. And so they can influence and we can try to have a better world. Now, what am I saying in that when I'm calling it a better world? I'm talking about a world where I'm free. And you might see that as a form of anarchy, right? I'm free to do what I want to do as long as it doesn't harm other people. Now, the problem is where is that line, right? Now, let's use Duterte's. I feel like but anyway, let's take President Duterte's war on drugs, right? He's also feels that he is making the world a better place. He feels like he's making the world a safer place. He feels like if I can be a dictator and I can just scare everybody away from drugs, right, that I'm going to save lives. Now, is he really saving lives? Because look this up. How many people have died in Duterte's war on drugs? Matter of fact, how many people have been murdered in Duterte's war on drugs? Because I do believe it's murder. If you are a police officer and you kill somebody, and you're the judge, jury, and executioner, like that's murder to me, bro. This that's no. You can't not maybe not everybody's murder. Maybe there was like one or two, but that just gives police like way too much power. And if anybody understands anything about police and power and how that works out, there's no doubt that you get corruption. Look back at the Stanford experiment. I'm gonna have you pull that up next, which is the Stanford prison experiment. What was my question about Rodrigo? Oh, how many people have been killed under Duterte's war on drugs? Click on that one. It's the top one. It says, based on data from nearly 40 sources, including local and international newspapers in both English and Filipino, the ACLED, whatever that is, concluded that since 2016, at least 7,742 civilians have been killed in anti-drug operations, 25% higher than the police figure.
So the police were like, no, it's not that bad. It's only been 5,000 people.
Right. Yeah, the police were like, and this is according to The Economist. You can take that for whatever it is, whether you consider that a reputable form of media. But yeah, The Economist states that based on data from nearly 40 services, it's almost 8,000 people. Now, that's 8,000 people. That figure was given to us in 2021, and that was since 2016. So that was 7,742 people in the course of 5 years. That's a little over 1,000 people a year. Basically, Duterte kills one person per day in his war on drugs.
At least.
At least.
It's more like 3 people.
And again, he is using, his police are using.
And dude, we're also talking about the Philippines. This is like, that's a substantial portion of your population.
Yeah. And you know what, like, I wonder how many people overdosed from marijuana in that period of time.
0.
So I could die for having a little bit of marijuana, but
So who's concerned about lives here?
Yeah, so who's concerned about lives?
As far as the weed's concerned.
I don't know. How many people died from drugs in the Philippines? Can you look that up too? How many people died from drugs in the Philippines since 2016? In the Philippines since 2016. I'm trying to, compare apples to apples type shit.
That's the same. It changed the question back.
Yeah.
It's still just talking about the police figures.
How many people died from drug abuse in the Philippines? You do that one. Click that link. No, click that link right there. Down. Go back up. How many people died? Right, dude. Scroll down.
The small.
See that? How many people died from drug use in the Philippines? Do you see that? Yes, thank you. God dang it. It keeps answering the same shit. Fix your shit, Google. I want to search for my answer, which is how many people have died from drugs. So anyway, I'm not going to be able to get that right now. My question is, how many people's lives has he saved? Right? Like when we're looking at, the abuse of human rights and just killing people. And if those are the numbers, which, he claims there's 25% less, they're also using unmarked cars, vigilante type police officers.
It's
to
just
do
you can go have a career hunting drug addicts.
yeah, literally, like, and it's okay. Nobody's gonna care.
What kind of people do you think that
Okay, equivalent of
incentivizes? It's about 1 in every 50 Filipinos uses drugs.
This is.
So really
I am
broad.
sure you're following the statistics for the Philippines, where the prevalence of drug use is 2%, the equivalent of 1.7 million Filipinos. So if that 2% is how many fucking people live in the Philippines?
But it doesn't give any drug specification.
What's the population of the Philippines?
Looks to be about 50, 60 million.
That's what I was seeing. It's 113 mil in 2001. I mean, when you think about that, I don't know, what's 8,000 people? I'm sorry, 8,000 people died jacking off on the toilet last week. I'm sorry, that was crass and rude and insensitive. No, and I'm being facetious as I'll get out right there. But if you know, that raises the good question. Like, is for Duterte to be in his shoes, it's like, wait a minute, maybe of the 1.7 million drug users, if I kill 7,000 of them over a 5 year, maybe I'll scare some of them to stop using it. I don't agree that murder is a good way to motivate people, but he does. And many dictators, that's here's my thing. A lot of people over time have felt that that is the best way to run a government. I mean, we still have many across the world that fear is the way to motivate behavior. And the U.S. government isn't much different. I mean, you know what I mean? We've had our laws for a long time. If you do these things, you're going to go to prison. We're going to kill you or whatever.
Well, and all this talk about how political gangs form up and outcompete each other.
And then they just turn into really, they're all just a bunch of cartels because they're all just a bunch of different mafia families. I mean, who do we want in charge of our country right now? Do we want the Trump mafia family or do we want the Biden mafia family? I don't know which one you want.
It reminds me of that Nietzsche quote. One who hunts dragons must be careful lest he himself become one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is that what it takes to just outcompete? Is at some point you're gonna have to form a gang?
And obviously, like, he's got supporters. Like, he's the president. He's winning elections. I don't know how legal their elections are.
But it's like you're the one going around apparently shooting people in the head.
I mean, but it's not. He's not doing it physically. Like, it's his police force.
Tomato.
I agree.
But it's like, you're the gang now.
Mm-hmm.
What were you worried about? Were you worried about, like, what was the worry? Like, what was the necessary evil that you were rising up to fight against?
Yeah. Well, and I guess, you know, that question right there makes me wonder, like, and consider, you know, what human rights is he breaching? I you know, if I'm going to go under the human rights of the freedom to travel, the freedom to be safe and secure in my own shit without being harassed and bullied, you know, the right to due process when I'm being charged with a crime. You know, I think that's the biggest thing, is that, you know, he's got people that he just has on a list as addicts. And I think that's where some people have issues, is that, you know, they see an addict as maybe a person that's not quite responsible for their behavior. They you know, or they respect how challenging addiction can be to overcome, and so they want to give some leniency to those people. They don't think they should just be murdered. Um, the problem for somebody like Duterte is that those people are likely, oftentimes users are the dealers as well. You know, but as far as the human rights aspect of it, I think the biggest part is just like the idea of due process under law, right? To be formally charged and arrested and to have a trial and to be sentenced in such a way. Whereas they're just literally like rolling up in unmarked motorcycles and capping motherfuckers like literally just pop and driving off like literal of gangland style murders. Um, so yeah. And I think that as a really big fan of the U.S. Constitution, I recognize that the gangsters that founded the United States, because remember, these are the smugglers, these are the pirates, right? John Hancock was a pirate. He was a smuggler. John Adams, a lot of these people, they were, you know, history, the books, and indoctrination through our education system will tell you that there are heroes, and they are, but they were real people too, and they were gangsters. They were smugglers. They were criminal.
Well, and you
Like,
don't have it, like you don't have to be a monster to be a monster hunter. Like even in what Nietzsche's saying, because if you know anything about Nietzsche, like he's basically trying to say 100 things with one sentence.
right.
That's why he's very like dense to read. But what he's implying there is like, now you can ride a very fine line,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes a different sort of vigor and courage, and I think in a lot of ways that's very classically liberal.
What do you when you say classic liberalism? What do you mean? What does that mean?
That was sort of my Cliff Notes version of it. But it's essentially the principle of, to me, it's very much libertarianism.
Mm.
Like it's in a lot of ways, it's the foundation for modern capitalism, but without any of the economic jargon. It's just, all right, you own your stuff because you're a sovereign individual. You have the right to that. You have the right to engage in business. I say this as somebody who this is the first time I've ever heard of Maria Ressa.
Well, and to me, I don't know. I think liberal. When I think conservative and liberal, I think along the lines of conservatives are people that want to keep things the way they are. They want to keep things kind of close knit. Um, they want to they don't want a lot of expression. They don't want a lot of freedom of expression. They want uniformity. They want things because they feel safe where things are, and conservative also means like, where I might wear just like a gray suit where somebody else might wear a flamingo pink, because they're liberal. You know what I mean? Like that's a weird kind of thing, but that's the difference to me between conservative and liberal, right?
I mean, beyond the weird...
conservative is going to say there are only two sexes, whereas a liberal is going to say there's 10,000 million.
I mean, beyond the...
Okay, maybe not all liberals. Like,
beyond the political virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Like, the formal original definition of liberalism.
Right.
Like, this was the left wing.
Right.
Back in the day. Like, in the 1700s. This was the left wing. It was this radical idea of, you know what, we think the town is the right to legislate itself as its own official gang, and if those are the hoops we got to jump through, and if that's the game we're playing, well, our town is its gang. Like,
See,
we are sovereign because we are an actual community.
when I think of like liberal liberty and that freedom, it goes back to I'm allowed to do what I do as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to have homosexual orgies at my house every weekend, as long as everybody there is consenting adults, then there's no issue, right? Like, who cares? As long as I'm not hurting anybody else. The problem is people want to like gray that line, right? Because then it's like, okay, well, they will claim that drug use affects other people, right? So how does my marijuana use affect other people? Well, I'm supporting an illegal drug trade. Okay, well, if it wasn't illegal, I wouldn't be doing that. Marijuana is a bad example for what I'm trying to use, so I'm gonna move on from that because I think the idea of crack cocaine or fentanyl,
Or
right?
owning a gun. Does me owning a gun and am I propping this whole industry up by participating in it?
Yeah.
It's the same rules.
Yeah, but to me, that again, that goes to the freedom of the individual, and that's what we constantly we battle with in the world, right? And when you think of like civilizations, even the beginnings of civilizations, you have a set of rules, and oftentimes when you have a bunch of people gathered in one community, they come up with their own form of rules for what they feel is best. Unfortunately, that urban community, right? When you bunch of people up and you create an urban setting, the needs of an urban setting are much more different than those of the rural setting. And so that's oftentimes where you find another issue there, is because the people in the frontier are free. They have to be in order to survive. Whereas the people in the community, hey, if you want your government cheese, you're going to need to say government, please, and so, that comes down to, again, those agreements that we have as humans. There are a need for laws. Like, number one, I think that murder should be illegal. And that goes against one of our animal instincts, which is when we rage and we want to fucking create violence because we're not getting what we want. But I think murder should be illegal. I think it should be illegal to steal somebody else's shit. In any form, And this is coming from a person that grew up as a kid. I was a klepto. Like, as a kid, bro, you didn't want to leave nothing around me. But I do. I think that it's wrong. I think that taking other people's stuff is wrong.
Made for a good Zippo collection, though.
Nah. Lighters were the last thing I was gonna steal. I didn't even I would steal them, but I wouldn't even take those intentionally. That's how much of a klepto I was. It's like I steal shit, not even mean to. Nah, but if there was something valuable that I wanted and I felt like there was an opportunity for me to get it, that's what I did. That was where I was. I didn't have a lot. I felt like everybody else had a bunch of shit and I had nothing. So what was I I was a scavenger, opportunist scavenger. Anyhow, but I did learn from that, you know what I mean? Like, I learned, I lost my own shit. I had shit stolen from me, and then I'm like, oh, this isn't good. I don't want that kind of karma. But that's what I did as an individual, and you can't force me to do that. You can't force me to come to that conclusion, as much as a society you would want to. No, what you can do as a society is maybe potentially create situations so that you don't have a bunch of kids running around who feel like, they've been robbed and cheated, and so they start robbing, cheating. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. So, back to Maria Ressa, because I do want to give her respect. And anybody who's watched so far, all 20 of you, thank you very much. I appreciate you. Before I get back to Maria, I do want to remind everybody that these episodes are brought to you by H2O, God's Wonderful Water. Make sure you drink a little bit. It's so good. Water is so good. Anyway, this episode is brought to you by Water. Thanks, Water, for the sponsorship. And so before I close up, I do want to return back to the kind of original catalyst for this conversation. Ooh, I like that. The catalyst for our conversation. That gives me a little bit more freedom to be anarchical. about our conversations and not just stay on one thing. But Maria Ressa, I just want to say if ever you were to hear this, you have my respect tremendously. I don't know if I could stand up as tall as you have and as big as you have. And I have a great respect for people like you, who with integrity will fight the monster without becoming the monster, who will maintain their integrity. Excuse me. Who will maintain their integrity in the face of monsters, in the face of people with the legal power to bully, harass, and oppress. And I think I think that out of all the people in the world, those are the people that I respect the most. And I think that she deserves the attention. And I want to leave on a final note, which is that she says that what we saw in the Philippines and the way that they take over democracies and create dictatorships. She said that what is happening in the Philippines is happening in other smaller countries around the world. And that the tactics that they are using and employing in the Philippines, and this was a Frontline episode this was 2 years ago. She said that they are they are going to start using that on the United States. And I thought that was very interesting because that was almost like, kind of conspiracy theorist and some shit they put you on the alt-right for. And so I don't want that to be ignored. So anyway, question of the day: human rights or human lives? Which is more important? Which is more important to you? Second request: anybody, please, somebody other than me, make a comment on one of our podcasts.
I'm sick of hearing from you. Chit.
Chit chat with Chet on Dilligan's Island. Deuces.